Hi YouTube, it's AC Dodd here, and I've got something a little bit different for you. So I've been meaning to do one of these for a while, which is basically a video on how to kind of service a cylinder head rather than, you know, the full rebuild. Because obviously anyone can throw a checkbook at a cylinder head to make it work, but I've just got one in from a good customer of mine who needs a bit of help, and they've got a 91,000 mile 998 A plus engine that the head gasket's gone on, and obviously they've taken the head off, had a quick look, and they realised that the head has got some wear on it, but they want the head put back into a reasonable condition, but they don't want to, you know, spend the whole bank doing it. So this is an ideal cylinder head for me to actually do this video. I think it'll be in a number of parts, so without further ado, let's get in and see what this cylinder head is, and then we'll start to look at the work we need to actually get this cylinder head working. So what's the customer bought in? In this case, we've got a nice early 90s unleaded 998 A plus head casting. So this is the CAM 4810, and as you can see, it's already been stripped. This is the way the customer's brought it in, and they've had a quick go at cleaning it, but obviously I've got to do a bit more cleaning. So the intention with this work is not to rebuild it by changing guides and all the rest of it. Now, I've already had a look, and we've got some play in the guides, but it's by no means worn out. Now, I've seen a lot worse at 91,000 miles. In fact, I've seen a lot worse at 50,000 miles. But in this particular case, I think I've been told that this car only does sort of 3,000 miles a year. It is used daily, but for very short runs. So that might account for why it's got so much carbon and various bits and pieces in it. Clearly, it needs a tune. But what we're going to do is I've already gone through and checked the guides. As I say, we've got minimal play. Okay. There's a little bit more in the exhaust, which is normal for these unleaded cylinder heads, but it's by no means knackered. So we don't have to do any of that, but what we do have to do is clean the cylinder head, check it for cracks, and then we are going to look at the valves and seats. So let's get into the cleaning up and see what it looks like. So getting into the cleaning, we can see the first of a few problems. So I've basically cleaned the surface, cleaned out the top of the chambers, and the first problem we've got is that little indent there. And if you can see the witness of the firing, that little indent is right on the firing. So there is a potential weakness there. So we need to skim this cylinder head to make sure, A, to make sure it's flat, and B, to remove that that indent, because what we don't want is any problem with sealing on a firing of the gasket. So that's the first thing. Second thing we need to look at is if you can just look in there and see how much carbon has actually built up around there. Filled that throat up. If we go to one that isn't, which is there, you can see that goes straight down. The one next to it has got the same issue, right? Just totally coked with carbon. Now, I did mention earlier that this has done 91,000 miles. I've just been corrected by the owner. It's actually done 98,000 miles. So clearly we've got a couple of cylinders that are using burning a bit of oil. So we need to clear that out. And before I can crack test it, I need to clear that out so that I can detect if we've got any cracks down into the port. So let's get that done and move on. So I use the magnafluxing process to detect cracks. So this is basically just a magnet. We'll put a magnetic field, induce a magnetic field across the cylinder head, and then we sprinkle on some iron powder, and that will basically line up with any cracks that are there. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it's a really good idea now on these older castings, because at the end of the day, any cracks, this is the time to show it up when you've actually got the thing on the bench, rather than when you're going down the road. So I'll get this done and we'll see what the results are. So I've just gone down with the powder, and yeah, I can't see any cracks on that. So for nearly 100,000 miles, That looks absolutely ideal. So what we'll do is we'll turn it over and get the other side down, and hopefully that's a good casting. And on the top surface, again, you can see the slight reddish powder on there. Again, I can't see any cracks on that top surface. So yeah, that casting is good to go. The owner also tells me the engine wasn't running hot, which is excellent. So that also tells me there's perhaps no issues with the cooling jacket, and that's very good, because actually when we look inside, the person who brought it in has also said it's been flushed, and we can see it's actually quite clean on the inside. So I don't actually need to put it in the rust tank to clean the inside out. So that maintenance has obviously kept the any remedial work bill down, which is really good. So you know, when you're trying to work on a budget, if you've been looking after the car yourself and been doing good maintenance, like flushing the water jacket and things like that, and using your antifreeze, then you won't have to pay for things like derusting and stuff like that, because the casting will be in good condition, and obviously the engine won't overheat. So things like that are actually well worth doing. In terms of this casting, yeah, we're good to go on to the next stage. So let's crack on. So give it a quick clean. Now, before we can carry on, because I've now Magnafluxed the head, we need to make sure that our magnetic field is reduced. And as we can see, after Magnafluxing, we have got quite an extreme magnetic field. So what I want to do is to try and knock that down. You can see, like, right over the end there, that's very bad. So obviously I'm using a current indicator here, but the process is the same. If I was using a Gauss meter, it would give similar readings. So these work on the same process. It's just that this particular meter has been calibrated to read amps, and in this particular case it's just reading the small magnetic field. So I don't really care what the number is. The point is I want that as close to zero as I can. So what we'll do now is I'll just knock the magnetic field down to as close to zero as I can get, and therefore we'll end up with a cylinder head that won't attract any metal particles in its life. So after degaussing, so if we have a look at that and we move that across the cylinder head, we'll see now that that magnetic field has been largely completely cancelled out. So yeah, that is much better. So a lot of places when you have Magnafluxing done don't actually do that, and that is very worthwhile. It's even worthwhile doing to have your castings neutral, have the magnetism that's built up in them over time out of it neutralised and degaussed anyway, as just part of the normal engine rebuilding process. But you have to do it after you do the Magnafluxing. So next up we'll go on to the valve cleaning. So here the valves I've already cleaned up. That's how they were when they came to me. Now, interestingly, we can actually have a look at the condition of them. And one of the things you'll find with these unleaded cylinder heads is the valve seats get very pitted on the exhaust. And as we can see, that is far from being serviceable. So inlets, much better. And then obviously there's a centre one, very pitted. There is no way we can use that as it is, so that needs some remedial machining. So what we're going to do with that is reface that. There's the other one. And then obviously these are the ones that have yet to be cleaned. So I shall carry on cleaning those, and then we can finally have a look at that last exhaust valve. If we look there, we can see that it's already pitted, but once we cleaned it, we can see the true extent of how bad that is. Now these valves have got some wearing. I've already measured with a micrometer. We've got nearly a thou wear on some of those, but the reality is we have to remember that this is an old engine, okay? So what I'm doing now is going to see this engine do another probably sort of 40,000, maybe 50,000 miles before this will need doing again. So, and then obviously at that point we'll need to replace the guides, change all the valves, etc. But what I'm really doing here is giving it a service really to restore the lost performance due to the wear that we've currently got. So the reality is it's not always needed to replace valves with all new stuff, simply because this engine is only going to do sort of 3,000 miles a year, and it only does about 5 or 6 miles you know, to and from work. So it doesn't actually do a lot of work, so we don't actually need to replace those. But what we do need to do is to get rid of that pitting. So I'll finish the valves off and then we'll go over to the grinding machine and get them refaced. Something else to think about. I've just touched the end of that valve. That's one of the valves that was in there, in some swarf, and you can see it's picked up the swarf onto the end of the valve, and that's because it's been used and it's got warm in use, and it's been repeatedly fatigued over many years. So it's actually generated in a magnetic field, and this is one of the reasons why you should demagnetize engine components. Now, these factory valves have actually got a steel-based tip because they're not all one piece of valve, all one material. So when you get things like that happening, you really should be demagnetizing your engine components when you have the engine in for some work. You don't need anything clever, just one of these older clips demagnetizers works wonderfully for these small engine components. I can even do conrods on that as well. So yeah, fantastic piece of kit. I'll get these valves wiped clean and then we'll continue. I don't normally do this, but I thought it'd be fun to do it because I have the equipment to do it, and I can give you the option of seeing what happens and how bad the valve seal is on these cylinder heads after a few miles. So this has got 98,000 miles on it. So what I'm going to do now is put the valves in cylinder 1. They're all cleaned up. Obviously the seats are all clean, but there's been no remedial resealing work done. So this was basically cleaned and as you know, as it was delivered. So we can therefore measure what the seal actually was, you know, when it was last running on the engine. So let's pop over to the press now and I'll show you that being tested. So I've got the head mounted in the valve leakage test rig. So I've got the valves installed in number 1 chamber. So we'll put the cylinder leakage tester on now and see what we've got. Okay, so I've got it connected to number 1, and as we can see, we've got 16% loss. The other thing is, you might just be able to hear the hiss. And that's the air escaping out of the exhaust port, and that coincides with those pitted valves. So the number 1 cylinder score is 16%. So let's go through the rest of them and see what this head was actually delivering after 98,000 miles of on the road use in the UK. So this one is cylinder number 2 under test. And if we can hear that, you can hear the hissing that's coming out of the centre exhaust port. So that just gives you an idea of exactly how bad the seats are on these exhaust valves. So let's get on to number 3. So we're hooked up to cylinder number 3 and we've got just about 16%. So as we can see, that's in there now with the valves in there. We'll finish off doing number 4, and then we've got a whole set of readings that we can then gauge our work once we reface the valves and get them all relapped in. And chamber number 4, 8%. So that's the best one out of the lot. So what we've got to do now is get this all over on the bench and then start doing the remedial machining to improve that seal. And then get the head skimmed. So let's crack on. Okay, I'll leave it there for this part 1. So that takes us up to you know, stripping the head, obviously assessing its condition, and then obviously thinking about the remedial work. Now obviously I just included the valve seal checks there so you could actually see how bad it was, and that's, as I say, 98,000 miles on unleaded fuel. It actually destroys the seats on the valve head. The seats in the head are fine. So what we now need to do in part 2 is we'll go through the processes of the machine work we need to do to actually restore that head, and we'll also go back onto the valve seal checking jig, and we'll verify that our work has actually sealed and brought those figures right down to hopefully virtually 0. But with all that being said, I look forward to seeing you on part 2, And as ever, please like, share and subscribe. Also hype this video, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.